3 minutes at the appropriate agenda items. Mr. Melhirish, over to you now.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you, members and members of the public, and welcome to the Executive on the 24th of June. Just to let you know that this meeting has been held in under the recent government regulations brought in to allow for remote meetings to take place and to allow for decisions to be made. Hopefully everyone present today will be able to hear the meeting. However, in the event of a technical failure, the leader will adjourn the meeting and set a new time to reinstate the meeting. Please be aware that the meeting is being recorded, and once the meeting has finished, we will have the recording of the meeting available for inspection on the Council's YouTube channel in the next few days. Can I please remind all members of committee that they should have their video on, but will remain muted until invited to speak. All members of executive who wish to speak, if you could please use the instant messaging function on the left-hand side of the screen to raise the attention of myself or the leader, and you will be invited to speak. All members of the press and public will remain muted unless they have registered to speak. We do have one registered speaker today, and at the appropriate point in the meeting, the chairman will let them know when they can make their representations, and at that point, their call will be unmuted so that they can make their representation. And just to say that the format of the meeting will be as per the agenda published. The agenda is available on the Council's website for those members of the public on the committee's page, so you can view the proceedings, the agenda and the reports from that page. I will now hand back to the Leader of Council.
Thank you, Mr. Melhirish. I'd just like to ask each councillor and officer who's taking part in the meeting if they could introduce themselves and confirm that they can see and hear me before we start the official business of this committee. And I'd just like to start with the Deputy Leader, please.
Good morning, Leader. I am Councillor Jill Slocum. I'm the portfolio holder for Inward Investment and Growth. And yes, I can confirm I can see and hear everything.
Thank you. Councillor Caswell, please.
Good morning, Leader. Good morning, everybody. Yes, I can hear you and see you, and I can fully conversant with the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duddridge.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Councillor Lance Duddridge, Executive Member for Customer Access and Digital Delivery, and I can see and hear everything.
Thank you. Councillor Gilling.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, everybody. My name is Councillor Andrew Gilling. I'm the Executive Member for Housing, and I can hear everything that's being relayed, and both audibly and visually.
Thank you. Good morning. Councillor Mark Healy.
Good morning, Leader. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Healy. I'm the portfolio holder for Commercial Asset Management, and I can see and hear you loud and clearly.
Thank you. Good. And Councillor Keane.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Janet Keane. I am the portfolio holder for Communities and Wellbeing. My ward is Burnham as Highbridge and Burnham Marine. I can see and hear everything, although until just now there was a temperamental machine. It was coming and going. Let's hope I can remain stable for the next hour or so.
Yeah, I think we're all in that similar position this morning. Can I now ask SLT to introduce themselves, please? Chief Executive?
Good morning, everybody. It's Alison Griffin, Chief Executive, and I can also confirm I can see and hear everything. Thank you.
Who else we got? Mrs. Turner?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Alison Turner. I'm the Assistant Director of Finance and Property and the Council's Section 151 Officer, and I can confirm that I can see and hear everything.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Brown.
Good morning, Leader. I'm Bob Brown. I'm a Strategic Director, and I can confirm that I can see and hear everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Bamsey.
Good morning. As Doug Bamsey, Strategic Director, I confirm I can hear and see. Thank you.
Mrs. Wellman.
Hello, Melanie Wellman, legal advisor to the committee. I can confirm that I can see and hear everything.
Thank you. Who have I forgotten? Mr. Milhewish.
Only me, but Andrew Milhewish, committee manager for the meeting today.
Right. Thank you, and we're joined by various officers, authors of the report. I think then, Mr. Milhewish, if you're happy, I'll start the agenda proper.
Yes, please, Leader.
Right. Again, welcome to the executive. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have apologies?
I'm pleased to report today no apologies, all members present and correct.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, to receive any declarations of any disclosable pecuniary interests or personal and prejudicial interests in accordance with the Council's Code of Conduct. I have Councillor Mark Healy first.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to declare a personal and prejudicial interest in item 6 because of a professional nature, but must stress I have no financial gain from any outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. You happy with that, Mrs. Wellman?
Yes, thank you. It's a personal and prejudicial interest.
Councillor Keane?
Thank you, Leader. Agenda item 6, the proposed sale of land at Alport. I do not have a financial or other personal interest in it, but there is a level of predetermination, and therefore it would be wise for me not to take part in any vote.
Thank you. Mrs. Wellman, you happy with that? Mrs. Wellman. Oh dear, things are going well already.
Sorry, were you addressing me, Leader, or someone else?
If you're happy, yep.
Yes, thank you.
Good. Right, then moving on then, minutes. To confirm the minutes of the executive held on the 11th of March 2020, a copy of which has been circulated. Are members happy that I sign them as a true and fair record of the meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Right. On this occasion, Mr. Milhewish, should we go through the whole attendance?
Yes, Chairman.
One by one.
Yes,
yep.
Leader. So I was just about to step in. I was just looking for the mute button, just to say if you could just ask each member to confirm that they are either in favour or against the minutes being signed as a correct record. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slocum.
Thank you, Leader. Whilst I wasn't present, I am in favour of signing those minutes, but unfortunately I was unable to be there. Thank you.
Councillor Caswell.
Happy to agree the minutes, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Duddridge.
Happy to agree the minutes.
Councillor Gilling.
I approve the minutes. I'm happy to sign them.
Councillor Healy.
Thank you. Happy to approve the minutes of the meeting.
Councillor Keane.
I approve the minutes, Leader.
As do I, and I will virtually sign them at a later point. Right, moving on then. Any urgent business? I'm not aware of any urgent business. Is that correct, Mr. Milhewish?
Yes, there is no urgent business today, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. We come to number 5, public speaking time. And at this point, the Council's constitution says that we can allow members of the public to speak, but I will defer that until we come to the particular items that people wish to speak on and take their statements or their comments during the course of the item under discussion following the officer's recommendation. And commentary. So we come to agenda item 6, which is the disposal of public open space at Lakeside. We've had 2 declarations of interest. and I assume now that those members will be leaving the meeting before consideration, or will they be speaking first?
I just realised I've inadvertently removed Janet Keane when I should have been removing Councillor Healy because he's declared a personal prejudicial interest. So I do apologise for that. We'll just get Janet back in. But in the meantime, just to confirm that Councillor Mark Healy will be now leaving the virtual meeting room, and we'll resume the meeting at agenda item 7.
Thank you. Right, as soon as we get Councillor Keane back, we will begin the report, and I understand that we will be going to Mr. Mander initially. Is that correct?
Yes, Leader. I'll start the report off, and I've got my colleague Nick Tate, who will also be joining in to give a bit more information with regards to some of the objections that have come forward. But we'll take the report from the beginning.
Right, as soon as we get Councillor Keane back in the room, we will commence. My apologies for the slight delay.
Hopefully, Councillor Janet Keane should now be back in the room. I do apologise, Janet. I clicked on removing you when it was meant to be Councillor Healy, but I will obviously, once you've made your representations later on, do the same there. So I do apologise for that slight slip.
Thank you. It's good a good exercise in Skype.
Right. Well, welcome back. Without further ado, then, the report before you members is a proposed disposal of land adjoining Lakeside Isleport High Bridge to Colin Residential to facilitate the residential development on 5.577 acres of land acquired for open space purposes. Without further ado, then, I shall pass to Mr. Mander.
Sorry, Leader. When does the speaker speak before the
I will invite the speaker after you've given your report, and then I'll invite the speakers, and then if there is anything that you need to come back on or explain, I will come back to you for clarity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Apologies for that, yeah. So if I could just go through the report that no doubt everyone's had a good chance to read. It's quite long, it's quite detailed, and I think it covers most of the issues. But obviously we have got, as you said, we've got speakers, and I know a couple of members want to have a say as well. So there may be other points which come back. But if I can just start with a bit of history behind the site. As I said, it was actually acquired in 1st July 1996. It was part of the Isleport Business Park scheme. It was intended initially to provide a sort of open space, a green lung for the users of the business park, and obviously other local residents who could get to it. It was acquired. It extends to 5.577 acres. For various reasons over the years, access was always a problem. We only ever had footpath access to the site. So the ability to develop it for general more open space purposes was difficult, and never really came to very much. So over the years, we were approached. We're moving on now to 2016. We were approached by Cone Residential and their agent acting for it, with a view to the possibility of looking at a formal development which could bring this site back to life, but also include a high quality area of open space within the scheme, which would be available to local residents and public to enjoy, making better use of the site as a whole, I guess. And the challenge, obviously, to the developer was to come up with a scheme which would be acceptable in planning terms and would provide not only a decent form of development, but also a decent form of open space as well. So when the executive in 2016 agreed to enter an option agreement with Cone, it was always on the basis that it was up to the developer to produce an acceptable form of development which could see a usable open space as part of the scheme. And clearly this has taken some years to bring forward, and I know there were lots of pre-application discussions to try to achieve a scheme which would be acceptable in planning policy terms and development management terms as well. So the actual option agreement gave and it wasn't actually signed until about July 2017, gave the developer 3 years to bring forward a scheme and take it through the planning process. This was duly done it went to the Development Management Committee on the 4th of February this year, and they resolved to approve consent. This then triggered, under the terms of the option agreement, also under terms of the Local Government Act, the need to consult with the public. The site, although it's never been formally laid out as open space, was acquired for open space purposes. Therefore, if a local authority wishes to dispose of any form of open space or site acquired for open space purposes, it does need to consult with the public. And as a result of that, there were 2 adverts placed in the local press inviting public comments or objections to come forward. Now, what the Local Government Act says or requires the council, or in this case executive, to consider any objections or representations, but not necessarily be bound by those representations or objections. So we have to consider what has come forward. And I know that there has been a huge amount of public interest in the site, over 30 emails and letters of objection. We did actually have 3 in favour, believe it or not. And there were 2 petitions, one online, which I think had 500 signatures, and another, the old written form, which had 700 signatories. So there's been a huge amount of interest, a lot of strong feelings about how this site should or shouldn't be developed. But the important thing is that we've sought to summarise all the objections in this report to give the executive a chance to fully consider their decision before making it. But having said that, we feel as officers that all the objections can be addressed or have been addressed through the planning process. And as you'll see right at the beginning, when it comes to the recommendation, we are recommending that the disposal of the land proceeds to Cone Residential. But as I said earlier, my colleague Nick Tate is here, and Nick has had a look at a lot of the representations. I think he feels he can perhaps address them and go through them. If you'd like to come forward now and just summarise his views on it.
Yes, thank you. And the report does go into quite a lot of detail on the nature of the objections. I've tried to group them together under themes, and I think it's important at this stage to note that actually virtually all of the areas and specific objections were matters that have been dealt with in quite considerable detail when the planning application was considered by Development Committee. They are almost all, shall I say, sort of planning related issues, but just very briefly touching on some of those key issues. Obviously the status of the land has been mentioned in a number of the objections. It's originally going back 20-25 years, yes, it was allocated but never actually implemented as public open space. And in fact, the existing lakeside development of 30 odd houses formed part of that original allocation. So in some ways, going back 20 odd years, the precedent of some of that land being disposed of for residential development was already set. In terms of the current local plan, and that's where we judge everything, it has no formal identification. It's just undeveloped land within the settlement boundary where our policies seek to maximise housing opportunities to meet the housing needs of the district. So it's not formally or allocated or designated as public open space. There was quite a number of comments around the biodiversity. That matter, again, has been looked at in detail. There was ecological reports submitted with the planning application. But I think more importantly, the county ecologist who provides us with detailed consultation responses has made a number of recommendations. And as a result of that, there are several conditions requiring various works, surveys, mitigation as part of development to come forward. But in terms of actual significant impact on protected species, there, in terms of his assessment, his independent assessment of what was submitted, all of those issues can be dealt with through conditions. There is no reason not to allow for the proposal to come forward. There was quite a lot of discussion about the 106 funding, and of course this goes to the heart of, we've secured some funding from the adjacent Springfield Road development, which has to be spent within 10 years. So it has to be committed or spent by 2022. So actually time is ticking on with that. That was because actually public open space, in terms of equipped public open space, couldn't be provided within the Springfield Road development, but this site offered the opportunity, being well related to that development. We've had a lot of work with the proposal to actually increase the amount of equipped public open space so that it can accommodate, in addition to what it would be needed to do to meet its planning requirements for development as itself, there's additional land has been identified that will enable some of that funding to set out and provide equipped public open space to serve the Springfield Road development. And hand in hand with this, and it links to the issue around some of public rights of way. There is an unsafe surface level crossing of the mainline railway, which connects basically the Springfield Road, sort of Asda area, to this site. As part of this proposal, effectively there will be an application to stop up that surface level crossing, and a new pedestrian cycle link from the A38 adjacent to the existing fishing ponds would be put in its place. This actually responds directly to Network Rail's concerns that any intensification of use, anything that attracted more people to use that surface crossing, they have an in-principle objection. It is an unsafe crossing. It features in their list of unsafe crossings across the southwest. And the only other alternative would have been to provide a pedestrian cycle bridge, which is estimated at anything up to £1 million in cost. And that's one of the fundamental reasons why the Section 106 monies and implementing the public open space in this area just haven't been able to come forward. As Mr. Mander mentioned, there is no access other than the existing public footpaths, so there was no alternatives. So this does offer the opportunity in terms of enhancing public safety, of providing a safe route into equipped public open space, stopping up a dangerous crossing, and therefore has benefits in terms of safety. Just picking up a couple of the other points there. Again, there's some mention about accessible natural green space standards. Again, important to note that there is a deficiency in Burnham and Highbridge as a whole. Just over 30% of the population do not have access to the minimum levels of accessible natural green space. However, when you look at the study for this area, the Walrow Ponds to the south are designated as accessible natural green space, and therefore provide accessibility in this area. The deficiencies are further to the east towards Alport Lane, or further to the north along the A38 towards Edithmead. So again, that matter was discussed and picked up when the planning application was considered. There's been mention about housing and the need for housing, and there is plenty of other opportunities to locate housing, and specific reference to something called our Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment. That document literally identifies sites across the district that people have put forward, and it classifies them as having potential or not having potential. So there will be a dozen sites around all of our individual villages, for example, one of which may come forward. The important thing in terms of the housing land availability assessment is through the local plan process, and the council's local plan was adopted February last year, so it's an up-to-date plan. This site features in its 5-year land supply policies, seek to maximise opportunities within the settlement boundary, and importantly, opportunities in the settlement boundary are sustainable locations. So this links to some of the issues around our wider climate change agenda, but by locating housing in close proximity, walking and cycling distance to jobs, schools, shops and other services, obviously that reduces people's need and dependency on the car in particular. This is why our overall sustainable policies seek, as I say, to locate as much development as possible within the existing towns and larger settlements. So it certainly is a site which is required and expected to come forward in the next 5 years in planning terms and make a contribution to our housing delivery test. And again, just as it's important to remember, there's mention about housing, developer profit, these things. We are still in the midst of a housing crisis. We do have very challenging housing targets and a need to deliver housing to meet our local population, as well as known and planned demographic growth over the next 10 to 15 years. And perhaps just finally picking up on the importance of green space and the health and well-being, absolutely, they go to the heart of our considerations in planning as well. And importantly, the increase in the amount of green space, and particularly the increase in the amount of equipped green space within the proposed housing development, will provide significantly enhanced opportunities for local recreation, particularly for children. But the view is you to have a range of activities and zones, so for young children to teenagers and indeed adults, in terms of opportunities for fitness and well-being. And of course, opportunities have been taken to improve and enhance the public rights of way into and through the site, so that further adds to those opportunities for walking and cycling. So it is something that's taken fully into consideration, and ultimately I think the proposal which is coming forward will offer greater opportunities certainly than there are at the present time, because we have to remember as it is at the moment, the site has footpath access only and is relatively modestly used, perhaps primarily for dog walking in that area. So this will provide facilities which will benefit to a much wider area, both new residents and existing residents in close proximity. So I think all of those are the key themes which have come out in terms of the objections, and I think it's confirmation that they've, through a very detailed process, have been considered in full when the application was taken to Development Committee in February. But obviously, if other speakers raise new issues or want some further explanation of those, we're happy to answer questions as we go through the meeting. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. One point of clarification I'd like before we go to the speakers. You mentioned the county ecologist recommendations, and were these dealt with through planning, and were the conditions put on planning to deal with ecology and diversity?
Yes, there was. And I was looking at it actually only yesterday. The county ecologist's response to the planning application as a formal consultee, and he reviewed all of the ecology assessments that were provided in support of the planning application. And ultimately, when you read through his reports, he sets out, I think there's 3 or possibly 4 specific planning conditions which will go onto an outline planning application. We have to remember the planning application is an outline, so it's effectively the principle other than the public open space, and those conditions will have to be complied with should the scheme come forward through the submission of reserved matters in due course.
Okay, thank you. Right, we have a number of people wishing to speak. Now I'm going to start with Councillor Keane, who wishes to speak.
Thank you, Leader. Is this a timed thing? Is it 3 minutes?
3 minutes, yes. Yeah.
Thank you. The recommendation of this report refers to the executive meeting in December 2016, at which I was present, and I recall speaking then against disposal. The decision then was to refuse to sell the land as the price offered was insufficient. Today's report acknowledges the county's priority in increasing housing. However, the number of market homes proposed will not fulfil the shortfall in the government's estimated target for Sedgemoor, and there is already work in progress at one large site at Brew Farm, and permission has been granted for another 200, slightly more, homes on the other side of Isleport Lane. The provision of homes is a laudable objective, but not at the cost of quality of life, and an open space offers quality. If there is one thing that we have learned during this pandemic, it is that people need open spaces for their physical health and psychological well-being. I oppose the disposal of that land, and I would ask you to retain it for the following reasons. That land is almost the last green open space on the edge of the town. It is adjacent to the Walrow Ponds, which are well maintained and stocked by the Angling Club. The patch is small, but being adjacent to the ponds is a refuge and foraging space for wildlife, some species of which are endangered. The table on page 8 of the report offers a smaller, better quality provision of green space within the proposed development. Well, that's nonsense. A man-made, manicured, weeded lawn does not replace the natural habitat, which has become wild over the years, where the complex ecology lives. The Council has made a commitment to the climate change emergency, and we have recruited a postgraduate research officer to assist and advise on how we can contribute to and control our own local remedial actions to achieve our goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2030. We spend officer and member time in pursuing and implementing these measures. Building over an open wild space is a contradiction of those aims. My wish list is for the Council to retain that land and replace the covenant so recently lifted by the previous landowner, and allow the land to remain a refuge for all the complex organisms and creatures, fowl, animal, insect and reptilian, who live there and contribute to the fresh air we breathe. Future generations will thank us for that gift, when all around us they could see concrete and tarmac. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Janet. Thank you. We now have a member of the public, Joy Russell. Are you here, Joy?
Hello.
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Right. Please go ahead. You've got 3 minutes, and I'll let you know as you approach the end of your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the Executive. As a resident of Highbridge, I wish to highlight the concern of our community about the lack of wild spaces within our area. Whilst collecting signatures for my petition, I listened to how strongly everyone felt about the overdevelopment of Highbridge and their passionate reactions to losing any more of our green space. Sadly, a large proportion of the hundreds of people I spoke to were disheartened and sceptical that any good would come out of my efforts, and they were furious about £400,000 S106 public money being handed over to a private developer merely to make their development more viable. They are angry and feel sorely aggrieved by what they see as so many disgraceful recent planning decisions in our area. You were elected to serve us, and to date we feel seriously let down. The people are now sick of being reminded of your key priority for building more and more houses. It's not all about money. Time and time again during the lockdown, we have spoken to people searching for somewhere green to walk, and ones that have found the field were horrified to learn about the planning application. The council that created the Apex Park, which is also a flood defence, can be proud and hold their heads high. Are you the council who will be remembered for just saying yes to more and more houses to the detriment of our environment and community? Having signed up to the climate emergency, make it your mission. Show us you are forward-looking and committed to your ecological responsibilities. Make the most of our natural assets and their inherent health and well-being benefits. Capture the community energy created through the COVID crisis. Initiate climate mitigation now by tree planting and using sustainable flood defence, and seriously consider biodiversity loss and gain. Increase the wildlife potential. You can achieve your green agenda by starting here and now. We need to see you acting on this pledge, and this is the ideal opportunity to prove to us you mean what you say. Let our children learn hands-on how to rewild and care for the planet. You have a head start with this improvement of this white land, as the backbone is already in place. Don't be responsible for losing the creatures we already have here. Protected species, like 10 different species of bat, the rarest being Leisler and the greater and lesser horseshoe bat. There are common soprano and pipistrel
30 seconds.
Serotine, nocturnal, brown, long-eared whiskers. Let's not lose red species birds like the grasshopper warbler, song thrush, house sparrow, and on the amber list listed such as bullfinch and the willow warbler, or any of the following: blackcap, chipchat, white-throat, kestrel, sedge warbler, greenfinch, wren, robin, long-tailed tits. Protect the flora and grassland for pollinators, butterflies such as marbled white, brown argus, common blue, large skipper, the hedgerow for commerce, peacock, red admiral. Save space for damselflies and the emperor dragonfly, scourge chaser, black-tailed skimmer, common darter, not forgetting our precious bees, ladybirds, grasshoppers, crickets, froghoppers, shieldbugs, ants, hoverflies, foxes, badgers, otters, hedgehogs, water voles. When are you going to stop?
Thank you. Thank you. And I believe also we have Councillor Phil Harvey, who wishes to make a statement as well. Phil, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Right. Go you ahead when you're ready, and I'll allow you a little leeway on timing.
Thank you. I was advised 5 minutes because I specifically asked. The report's thrust is that all the objections raised are essentially planning matters, and as planning permission has been granted, there is no reason why the Executive cannot approve the sale. I would contend that just because approval can be given does not mean it should be. The NPPF says that open spaces should not be built on except in very special circumstances, and it doesn't restrict this injunction to public open spaces. Although it's argued in the report that the NPPF does not apply, I would assert that a good local authority should still consider these two principles, that is, that open spaces either have to be surplus or can be replaced by better or equivalent facilities, when considering the sale of land. First of all, I would contend that contrary to the report, the space isn't surplus. It could become an accessible natural green space. Now, the report says that the site is within 300 metres of the Wall Road Ponds, so it's not needed. But the Wall Road Ponds are not accessible to the general public. They're privately owned by the local angling association and they're kept locked. The 750 square metres of additional open space in the proposed development is not equivalent or better than the 5.6 acres of green space being lost, which is approximately 30 times larger. It's also doubtful whether it would be used by the residents of the Springfield Road development. Because now that we're going to close the access over the railway line, it means that the new development is further from Springfield Road than the existing Southwell Gardens. Now, these have a play area, a football field, and they have tennis courts which are planned to be converted into a mugger. And I believe that more Springfield Road residents will choose to go to Southwell Gardens than the new open space, and it will end up largely serving the new housing only. The second main point is, of course, we're talking about equipped open space compared with natural space. Now, the benefits of open space for the health and well-being of people are well documented. Natural England's Nature Nearby document, the WHO, and in fact our own health and well-being strategy says, health outcomes and inequality in health due to lower incomes is less pronounced where people have access to green space. Green areas provide shared space which enhances a sense of belonging and reduces social isolation. Other positive benefits of access to green space include reduced levels of overweight and obesity, improved mental health, and increased longevity. People also report better self-rated health. Now, Highbridge contains a significant proportion of low-income families, and the current crisis has shown increased levels of mental health problems in the community. But it's also shown that more people have benefited from discovering this green space. Despite the limited access, it remains accessible via footpaths, including one from the adjacent industrial estate. Losing this open space will remove this source of benefit to both residents and workers, and Mrs. Russell's statement has stressed its value to the community. If we work with organisations such as the Somerset Wildlife Trust and utilise the £400,000 Section 106 money from the Springfield Road development, significant improvements to this space can be made and a new green lung established for the people of Highbridge, rather than just yet another housing development. Now, in the local plan, this was identified as one of 177 opportunity sites, but it's the only one which can give the opportunity for establishing and enhancing a new green lung for the people of Highbridge. Not building on this site would still leave 176 other sites available for consideration. So I would urge the executive to reject the recommendation and do what is best for the local people, who for too long have, rightly or wrongly, felt their wishes have been ignored. You've seen the strength of the opposition. I would ask you to please take note of it, not proceed with the sale, but work instead to provide a new, valuable, natural green space in which local people can relax and enjoy the flora and fauna. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we start opening up the debate, I just wonder if either Mr. Tate or Mr. Mander wish to come back on any of the points raised, and then I will go to the Chief Executive.
Yes, I'll pick up some of those points and perhaps dealing with perhaps the wider principle of trying to establish a alternative, sort of open space which has investment into it in across the total of this area. I think we all have to remember that currently it is inaccessible other than the footpath. The footpath link from our port industrial site is poor, but could be improved. But it would certainly be irresponsible to do anything that would encourage greater pedestrian or cycle use from using the level crossing. It is currently a dangerous level crossing. Network Rail sent in terms of their response to the planning application, photographic evidence of a number of near misses, quite concerning near misses of people walking, push chairs across that, taking dogs across that. So that's fundamentally the reason why this site hasn't been able to come forward. If it was accessible, it would have greater potential for increasing public access. But unless monies of up to £1 million were found to put in, if it is physically possible, to put in a bridge there. It is a site which you would not wish to do anything to encourage greater use because of the heightened danger. So that's always been a concern, and that's a big reason why the site hasn't come forward, well, since '96. I did cover the point about the opportunity sites, but it's just to re-emphasise the council's adopted local plan that was adopted in February. This site is identified as contributing to the housing land supply. We identify sites which are most sustainable in terms of opportunities for walking and cycling. It is perhaps misleading to suggest there would be another 176 sites elsewhere. There will be 15 sites scattered around Brent Knoll. There will be 14 sites around East Brent. There will be 12 sites around Rooksbridge. Clearly, at best, one of those sites might be able to come forward under policies. It wouldn't be suitable to be putting hundreds of houses in our rural villages. We seek to concentrate housing at the larger towns where there's greatest opportunities, as I say, for walking and cycling, sustainable travel. Picking up just again the ecology issues, they certainly have not been underplayed. I've been reviewing, even as the discussion was going on, the county ecologist's responses, and he clearly raised concerns. His initial response, he still had a holding objection. Further work and further ecology work was done to the point where, through quite onerous and potentially quite difficult to implement conditions, but through conditions, he is satisfied that adequate and appropriate protection to existing species can be provided through both retention and enhancement and replanting when the details of the scheme come forward. But it is a matter that has been taken into a great deal of detail and account. So it's not something that has just been, shall I say, sort of brushed aside as unimportant. There's been a lot of work around the ecology. And again, just picking up on the open space element in terms of the use of the Section 106 monies. I mean, it's not necessary to get into a sort of discussion necessarily about the distance away, but actually, you know, by the provision of the new walking and cycle link from the A38 immediately adjacent to the existing ponds, actually it's about 50 metres further than using the railway crossing, and it is actually from Springfield Road development. It would be more convenient than going further to the open space at Southwood Gardens. But it's not a case of which is most convenient. It's about providing and making sure there's adequate provision and choice for everyone, and providing different offers. And that will be important in terms of health and well-being and exercise, and particularly for our youngsters and children, to provide them with equipped areas to encourage play and exercise going forward. But I think otherwise I'd say that the points that have been raised by the speakers, they have been picked up in the report's response, and they are certainly matters that have exercised quite detailed consideration when we were looking at the planning application. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Mander, is there anything you wish to add at this point?
Not much more, Leader, other than to say, obviously, that, you know, the process is that, you know, the executive originally resolved to give the developer an opportunity to work up a scheme. They've done that. There's been a resolution to grant planning consent on the site, and the decision really revolves around whether or not we wish to proceed with the sale or not, in light of the objections, in light of the current planning situation. Obviously, we feel as officers that these objections have been addressed as part of the planning process, and Nick has picked up some of the other issues raised this morning. So it's fundamentally an issue: do we or do we not wish to proceed with the sale in light of the planning situation?
Thank you. Mrs. Griffin, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Leader. There's not a great deal to add really to what my colleagues have said, but I think you know, the work that's been done has been thorough. It has looked at the objections that have been made, and they've clearly been taken seriously. I think the report outlines that there are, yes, there are some difficult decisions to be made, and priorities to weigh up, but there are positives coming from this scheme above and beyond the housing. And so you have to look at it in the round, and we unfortunately we live in a world where we're having to make those difficult decisions. But I do think having been through this work with colleagues, I feel satisfied that actually everything has been covered off as far as possible, and it is now a matter for the executive to consider whether they wish to pursue a course that was embarked on some time ago. But as far as the report today, I think it should satisfy members of the executive that everything has been done to provide a sustainable and positive solution to this land. And I think it's a matter for debate now. But I'm very confident that officers have done what they need to do to address the issues.
Yeah, and I must add, that it's a very comprehensive reports that we've been given today, and I'm grateful for that. Equally, we have 3 very impassioned speeches, and quite rightly so, for which I'm grateful. We will give due consideration during the course of the debate to the comments that have been raised. I would like to just stress, one of the speakers did say that it was prove that it's not all about money. I have to say, there's a real balance to be taken here, and it's not about money. It's about a number of highlights from the presentations this morning. For me, were that it's providing housing, much needed housing, whether we like it or not. To protect the future for our children, we do need to provide housing for them so that they will have somewhere to live. And equally, it is about safety. I must say I'm not overly keen on level crossings at the best of times, but I think the objection by the rail companies has been quite a valid one to be considered as part of this. What I will now do is I will open up the floor to any member of council who may wish to make a comment or put their views forward. We have a number of members of council here. If you could indicate by using the sidebar that you would like to speak, I would take you.
Just to help
now.
you out there, Leader, Councillor Evans has indicated to speak earlier in the conversation, so you may want to go to him to start with.
Right, Councillor Evans then. Thank you.
Good morning, Leader. Good morning, colleagues. I think a lot of the points made by the speakers this morning indicate the huge amount of passion there is around this particular area of public open space and the importance of the biodiversity. I don't want to repeat all those comments for you in terms of your deliberations this morning. I personally found those very convincing. I think you have been presented with a legal way forwards in which you could develop this land, but I'm not sure it's the best way forward for the council. The point that I particularly wanted to make, it has been mentioned by a couple of the officers about all these matters were looked into in depth on the development committee. As you know, I sit on the development committee, and Councillor Harvey spoke very sagaciously, and Councillor Murphy spoke with great passion, and we had members of the public at that decision as well. When we raised some of these as members of that development committee, we were told that those issues were matters for the executive to consider and not matters for the development committee to consider. And now we come to the executive, and now we're told, well, the development committee's already agreed to it, and so it's not an issue for the executive. And that I'm struggling with as a matter of process, because it seems to me that you told us it wasn't that some of these matters couldn't be considered before, and that they would be considered at a later date, and now we find that either wasn't the case, or perhaps we were being steered in a different direction. I'm not quite sure. I have a great deal of difficulty of the public perception of a council selling off public open space for housing. I think this decision really does need to be looked at again. I would urge members of the executive to consider their decision very, very carefully as to the way forward on this particular site, and I think that there should be an opportunity to scrutinise the decisions that have been made should you decide to sell. Thank you very much, Leader.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I must admit you have the benefit of hindsight. I was not at the Development Committee when this was considered. Clearly, from the list of objections and comments that have been made through the report today, those issues were issues that were planning matters and seem to have been dealt with through conditions through the planning process. And just to remind members again, what we are deciding here today is following the principle that we agreed to sell the land, whether there is anything material that we feel makes our decision different from that that we made in 2016. Mr. Mander or Mr. Tate, any comments on that?
Just briefly, and just to reiterate, because it's a very, very important thing. It isn't public open space. It is just undeveloped land. I mean, I was at the Development Committee. All of the matters that we've been discussing today, as you rightly said, those were planning matters that were discussed in some detail. I can't recollect what the matter but if there was anything we would have said would have been a matter of executive, it would have been about the land ownership and disposal of the land, because that is clearly the discussion that we're having now. But as we all know, the actual ownership of the land is not in itself the planning consideration. We were dealing with the principles and the issues, and therefore picking up on all of those matters: biodiversity, public open space, accessibility, etc., which are listed there. And those were certainly discussed on a lengthy debate before the resolution to grant was made.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I apologise for not picking up on the public open space thing. Yes, you're quite right in reminding us that it is not public open space, and having visited the site, you know, it's clearly it is an open piece of ground that is fairly inaccessible in its present form at the moment. Any other members of council wishing to make a comment? Mrs. Wellman, you wanted to make a comment.
Yes, it was just to reiterate what Mr. Tater said, that the issue that the planning committee wouldn't have taken into account is land ownership. So that would have been the matter that wouldn't have been taken into account at that particular time. That's a matter, obviously, for the executive.
Yeah, and yes, I've got you, Councillor Slocum. I will come to you. I'm just dealing with any other member of the council who wishes to make a comment or a statement at this time. Do we have anyone? Mr. Mel Hewish, have you been notified of anybody else who wishes to speak?
No, Leader, I can confirm there are no further requests. Councillor Slocum is now next in line.
Right, thank you. Without further ado, then, Councillor Slocum.
Thank you, Leader. My apologies. I hadn't put my name properly in, so I wasn't sure if you knew it was me. I apologise. Some of the points I picked up today was obviously about the undeveloped land, that it's not formally as an open space. I think that is a really important point. I think the county ecologist, the impact on protected species, I think when he said he's satisfied and these can be picked up with special conditions, I think that's an important factor. The unsafe railway crossing, I would, when you know a little bit about it, I think we all do, but some of the major concerns that have been with that, that is a big concern, and I think something that should be picked up for safety, public safety. I think the speakers, especially Mrs. Joy Russell, spoke with eloquence. Her detailed on parts of this is amazing, and I wouldn't want to decry anything that she said. But I think the point we have to look at as well is that on the other side of that coin is that this land will benefit so many families that are desperately needing land, desperately needing housing, for their children to grow up in a nice area, to learn about many species that still will be there. I come from Bridgewater and there's massive amount of development, but I can tell you my garden is full and yet there's development land all around me. So I think it does happen. But I think that I think we do have a responsibility, and it's a difficult responsibility because we have to weigh it both up and I feel that that we have to make this decision, and we have to make this decision to pass this recommendation. I think that it is the way forward, albeit I do not decry from the speakers of what they've said. I think they spoke very, very well. But I think we have to also be in a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the executive wishing to speak, please? Councillor Gilling.
Leader, thank you for that opportunity to speak. I wish to support the recommendation insofar that two things. A, I don't wish to repeat your comments. Firstly, housing is of a priority in this across this district, as indeed it is a national issue. But another area that does give me some cause for concern is safety, as you have mentioned quite rightly. Level crossings are an abomination in any form, state or form, and that should be preserved, and life should be protected at all costs. And whilst on a similar topic, I think life should be respected, be it wildlife or human life, because Lakeside is hardly what you would call the centre of a conurbation, and it is not the Serpentine near Hyde Park, but it is also an area which is surrounded by open countryside where wildlife can function, and indeed does, quite successfully. And I think we should take note of that factor. There are other species that are being protected across the district, and I think we should take notice of that. That's my contribution to this debate, sir. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Any other member of the executive wishing to speak, please? No? In that case, then we come to the recommendation. But prior to coming to the recommendation, I'd just like to reiterate that there were definitely some impassioned speeches there and some really valid points that were laid out. My concern always with anything like this is the loss of open countryside or open space, but equally that has to be balanced against the need to house people in decent, affordable accommodation, and that's an ongoing problem for the whole of the country, as we are being told by government as well as other local people who feel that they don't. Their children have little or no future in housing in our local area. So we have a responsibility on both sides, but it's on balance that we have to come up with the decision that we're going to make today. And I must admit, prior to coming into this debate and hearing what we said, I was wondering whether the loss of this piece of land was needed at this time. And I have to say, having listened to the debate and the reassurance that we've been given by the officers, I am now convinced that this is the right thing to do, with an enhanced area of open space, albeit smaller, but a far better developed open space. The removal of a level crossing, which I believe will only result in some kind of accident in the future, and I couldn't hold that upon my conscience if we were to start to make the access to this current site better. So on balance, I am happy to recommend the recommendation to executive, and on that basis call for a seconder, and then I will take the vote.
I would like to second. I'd like to second the recommendation, Leader.
Right. Just prior to that, I just want to check with Mr. Tate and Mr. Mander and the Chief Executive and any officer who wishes to come in and make any comment at this time before we go to the vote.
Nothing from me, thank you, Leader.
Nothing more to add, Leader.
And nothing further from me, thank you.
Okay. Then if Andrew Melhuish is ready, I will take the vote. And in making your decision, could you say that you've heard and seen the debate. And I will start it off by saying I've heard and seen the debate, and on balance, I vote in favour of the recommendation. Councillor Slocum.
Sorry, Jill, you're on mute. Sorry, Councillor Slocum, you're on mute.
I do apologise. It wouldn't go. Sorry. I have heard the debate and listened to it attentively this morning, and on balance, I would agree with the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Caswell.
Thank you, Leader. I have heard and seen the debate and taken note of what has been said, but I have to say I'm in favour of the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Duddridge.
Yeah, Leader, I've heard and followed the debate, and on consideration, I'd like to support the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Gilling.
Thank you, Leader. I too have heard and listened to the debate with interest and read the reports, and I'm happy to support the recommendation.
Thank you. And 2 members of the executive with declared interests are out of the room at the moment. I now go to Mr. Mel Hewish to report the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, members. The vote for the proposition that was moved and seconded is unanimously carried. So that's 5 members of the executive, because you rightly say 2 are out of the room. So that is a unanimous decision.
And thank you. And thank you, members, for the decision. Not all decisions are easy, and this one certainly wasn't, but I think on balance, the executive have made the right decision, and I thank you for that. There'll now be a short 5-minute comfort break, and if people could come back by about 12 minutes past, or 14 minutes past 11, whilst we get the other members of the executive back into the room. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I please remind all members to remain on mute during this time? Thank you.
Andrew, could I ask that Councillor Lance Duddridge contacts me, or I'll contact him during the course of the day? He's gone now.
Noted.
Thank you. Right, members, we now move on to agenda item 7, the SDC Recovery Group, terms of reference. Clearly, recovery is an important part of the work that we're going to be doing over the next months, etc. And whilst the terms of reference are important, what is important that we actually enact the recovery to the best of our ability in the local area. So without further ado, I will hand over the presentation to Mr. Bamsey.
And just before Doug does start the presentation, I'm just going to confirm to members there is a PowerPoint presentation. I will be presenting my desktop, so it will just be a short pause whilst the PowerPoint presentation loads up. So if you just bear with me, we'll get that on the screen, and hopefully everybody will be able to see the presentation.
Thank you, Leader. While Andrew's doing that, just Doug Bamsey speaking, Strategic Director. I lead recovery for the council. We're in a stage now, as members and the community will well know, which is both responding to the ongoing situation with COVID-19, but also, and very significantly, planning for recovery. Taking very much your lead, Leader, we are today concentrating on particularly presenting on what we've already done, but also, more importantly, even what we're going to do recovery. So that's where there are 3 colleagues of mine, Teresa Harvey, Adrian Gardner and Stuart Howlett, are going to present on the aspects of recovery they're dealing with, which is economy, the community and the environment. We're also going to give you an illustration of the sort of information we're collecting, because clearly evidence is going to be very important here. So first slide then, please. Or second slide, I should say, Andrew. So this is the what we're going to do today. We're talking about...
Hang on, Mr. Bamsey. Can I just confirm that everybody can see the slides on screen as I can?
Yes, Leader.
Yes, Leader.
Okay. Right, let's move on. Thank you, Mr. Bamsey.
Okay, so brief introduction, then as I said, splitting in terms of the external recovery, our economy, community and environment regulation, and then my fellow strategic director, Bob Brown, is going to talk about the internal recovery plan, because clearly it's important we both look to the community and the place of Sedgemoor, but also our own internal as an organisation. Next slide, please. So in terms of recovery groups, next slide. Now, it is a very complicated and crowded place of recovery, and the reason for showing you this is twofold. One, to demonstrate what's happening both at a regional level, and you'll see that the LRF means Local Resilience Forum, and that's organised at Avon and Somerset level. There's also a South West Chief Executives level. Those are very important for strategic. Now, we will feed into those and add feeding from and to those. At the county level, you will see that there's a variety of groups involved in recovery. The key to that is understanding that multi-agency groups are involved. In other words, people like NHS, obviously the County Council, police, fire, but also organisations like Enterprise Partnership, all of those are involved. And again, it demonstrates the sophistication, if you like, of the structure and how the amount of energy is being devoted to recovery. And also you'll see the headings there in terms of business cell, vulnerable people, and resilience and active travel response cell. So there's a number of activities occurring at the county level to complement the regional level. And then at the district level, and it's really important, and this is the subject of today's conversation, that we are organising ourselves to be able to respond to that county and regional level, that we feed into it, and indeed that we're feeding from it. And that's very much the subject to today. It is about what we're doing on recovery. And the terms of reference which are appended to the report is very much about achieving the governance to allow a programme board to oversee recovery, which would then report to the executive as required, and you'll see that in terms of reference suggestion of who is on that board, and that includes the leader, and very much for decisions to be made would come to the executive. And equally, you'll see that we have two sub-cells now, and that is both in business intelligence, which Stuart Howlett will talk about in a minute, and he'll give you some infographics that have come from that. And we also have an engagement involvement sub-cell, which is about how we engage with the wider communities. Clearly, what we're about here is delivering recovery that's very relevant and works with and for the community of Sedgemoor. Next slide, please. Now, this is just a graphical representation of all the different components there are of recovery, and you'll see that, again, the multi-agency nature of it. You'll see that some are very specific, like track and test, for example, but others are very much general. The important thing, just to say here very quickly, is that what we're doing at the Sedgemoor level needs to be influenced by and influencing all that's going on, the huge amount of activity there is going into recovery. Next slide, please. So, we've, from the beginning, decided to have an internal group, which is my colleague Bob Brown will talk about at the end of the presentation. And that's about looking at how we function as a council, how we recover as a business, if you like, and make sure we deliver externally for our community. And then the external recovery, which I'm leading on, and that's very much talking about how we focus on the whole district of Sedgemoor and how we return to that very used phrase at the moment, that new normal. And inevitably, that needs to include both the economy, businesses, jobs, training, skills, all of those things that constitute the economy, people's livelihoods, self-employed, those who are employed, infrastructure, things like delivering road, rail, schooling, all of those things that require infrastructure, things we're very familiar with, but have been given a real focus now in recovery, and not forgetting significantly, very significantly, communities, people, in other words, how we deliver community recovery for them. The place, in other words, places like town centres, because some parts of our area are going to be particularly impacted by the impact of lockdown, town centres being among them, hospitality sector, the resorts, and of course the environment. How do we make sure that is very much taken into account? Not least of which, because we need to make sure we're delivering on the climate emergency at the same time. And this is very much about trying to ensure that what we return to it's if you like, not just what we were doing, but it's a better than we were doing before, both in terms of environment and inclusiveness, because one of the things that's important for communities is we make sure that our recovery is inclusive as possible to make sure that all people benefit from it. Because, in simple terms, as I'm sure people appreciate, those who were worse off before the impact of the COVID-19 and lockdown could well find themselves in circumstances of being even worse off. So it's important that we deal with that. Next slide, please. And this Venn diagram just demonstrates how everything, the economy and environment, infrastructure, communities in place, are all integrated into one, effectively, recovery. But if it is showing that it's important emphasis in each of those, that we look at those individually, but more importantly, how do they all come together to produce recovery? So that's the structure of our plan. And with that, I'll hand over to Stuart, who could talk about some of the evidence we're gathering.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to take you through the next few slides. Members may recall that I did present some information at a recent members drop-in session in terms of the work that the subgroup that Doug mentioned, the data intelligence subgroup's been doing to help support some of the recovery task group actions. It's very much a developing area, but absolutely vital that we can understand the impacts that COVID's been having at a Sedgemoor level. And as part of that, we've been trying to develop a dashboard so we can keep some ongoing monitoring of the trends that are developing so that we can test performance against the recovery plan as we move forward as well. So hopefully these are quite strong visually, which we've put two together. The first is really covering the impacts, which is a slide in front of you, and the areas where I sort of dealt with at the recent members drop-in session. I wasn't going to go through it in significant detail, but there are a couple of new things that we've picked up on. So in terms of the universal credit payments, which in overall terms has risen by a third, we've been able to map that now. So we've got some heat maps that show that perhaps unexpectedly, it's the urban areas that have been affected most in terms of the impact of that. The other indicators set a similar picture to what I set out before, so high risk of redundancies of small businesses, the sectoral impacts on the hospitality, retail, manufacturing, construction industries, and also significant levels of furloughing. And again, as a sort of update, we now know that about 25% of the working population in Sedgemoor as of the start of June has been furloughed. So that just gives a view of the scale of some of the impacts that we've been seeing. And the other issue is, of course, the uncertainty around the ability of some businesses to reopen at all. Next slide, please, Andrew. So this presents infographics around response. So this is more about what we've done so far, what we've put in place. Again, much of this will be quite familiar, but it includes the provision of significant amounts of support, including £25 million worth of business grants paid to businesses, and of course a further £1.5 million currently being paid through the discretionary fund. Over 5,000 households in Sedgemoor received council tax hardship relief, and that equates to some £680,000. So, these are really large numbers to give a degree of scale of the impact. The infographic also captures some of the direct community actions in terms of welfare checks, food parcels, providing accommodation to rough sleepers, and also captures some of the frontline demand services in terms of respective calls into and out of Sedgemoor Direct, specifically around COVID. So a quick run through, but obviously, hopefully that gives members a bit of a view in terms of some of the impacts and response figures. Andrew, can I have the next slide, please? So moving on to the recovery plan, dealing specifically with the economy, I'm picking up the economy plan themes, economy theme and the infrastructure theme, which are clearly linked in terms of the overall importance. The need for certainty and providing confidence for inward investment are clearly vital in terms of how we deal with the economic shocks that we've seen over the last few months. In respect of economy, overarching theme is obviously about stabilising. That's the first thing we need to do, is stabilise. But as Doug said, we need to move forward as well, but in an inclusive and sustainable way so that everyone can benefit, or those benefits are shared widely. For infrastructure, the theme's about securing investment into infrastructure that supports the immediate recovery, but we have to have one eye to the future as well so that we can respond to those changing needs and aspirations that may have arisen through the crisis. Next slide, Andrew. So specifically looking at the outcomes and actions in terms of the economy theme, there's already been a great deal of activity in respect of business resilience, prompted by the need that we've had to administer unprecedented levels of government support initiatives, including the business grant and other supports that have been required. The positives, and there really are some positives that come out of this, is that the business community is now much more visible to us. We've embarked on the most significant business networking and intelligence programme that this council and others have done for many, many years. So as a result, we've actually developed really good understanding of the impacts, but also the areas of support that some of these businesses will be required, as well as creating communication links. And it's really important that we stay linked into our businesses as we move forward with recovery. Recovery plan actions seek to build on this, obviously, and to maintain these relationships. And we've already started a lot of important work in assisting businesses to reopen and restart safely. And I'm sure Adrian will talk about the town centres and the work that's going on there in a moment. Other more immediate actions that we've done have centred around a response to business closures and redundancies. So we've been seeking to match job losses with vacancies through the promotion of job fairs. Obviously, drawing together job losses and vacancies are clearly important, and where there have been areas that have had significant job losses, there have also been areas that have had significant vacancies as demands for those services have increased. So making the links between the two have been really important actions. Business support and development networks will be an important tool that we can continue to restore business performance to pre-COVID levels. That's where we want to get to, but also to hopefully continue beyond that. And through those networks, we can hopefully support skill development, entrepreneurism to maximise new ways of working. And I think everyone has this opportunity to work differently, and we need to be able to support businesses to do that. The COVID crisis has also emphasised the importance of thinking local. We heard a little bit about that this morning as well, and hopefully provides a real incentive to consider local procurement and the importance of developing local supply chains, which was in our thinking anyway, but clearly there feels more of an incentive now to move that forward. And we can build on our own successes as well in terms of the extent we've secured local labour agreements through the planning system. So again, there'll be a number of actions through local procurement. Place marketing is going to be vital. Promoting Sedgemoor as a place, as a visitor destination, but also a place to do business is going to be key to recovery centres and the tourist industry. And we need to establish new roles. Things will be very different, and we need to build on existing projects in the town centre, Celebration Mile, Northgate. They are going to give us hopefully an impetus to help drive recovery. And also in terms of the tourism industry, maximising that likely trend in home-based tourism is going to be vital, that we can sell ourselves as a place to come and visit. So whilst many of these actions are about returning the economy to status quo pre-COVID, the recovery plan also needs to go beyond that to support growth beyond. We need to move forward with the economic development strategy. We have really good objectives in that around diversification into clean growth, knowledge industries and advanced technologies, and we have some unique experience and opportunities through Hinkley Point C and Gravity to do that. So again, as we move forward, we need to drive those projects forward and support those projects, and with that to help Sedgemoor become a pioneer for clean and smart growth, developing skills in those areas, and that will also greatly assist us in realising our ambition to be carbon neutral by 2030. So that's economy. Andrew, infrastructure, thank you. As before, securing investment infrastructure is a high priority. It's the only way we can help unlock growth for Sedgemoor and provide that confidence for investment into the district. And some of this remains fairly traditional. So infrastructure such as strategic highway improvements, flood defences are obviously central to that. And there are a number of current work streams we're working in terms of shovel-ready schemes to be promoted through the LEP to try and deliver funding to help secure some of that infrastructure. But alongside that, digital infrastructure feels like it's going to be the most important thing and a really significant driver for recovery, particularly given its benefits to inclusion and participation. And we've already seen some of those benefits in terms of remote working, etc. And as a rural area, we have some great opportunities to challenge that idea that you need to be located in urban areas and work in terms of certain industries. The appeal that rural areas will have in terms of working environments, I don't think can be underestimated. And if we can secure more people working from home, remote working, we will benefit from income retention and greater spend locally in rural areas. So again, that's a key objective of recovery, is to try and maximise those opportunities. And clearly investment in broadband is going to be beneficial for businesses and employees alike, and hopefully challenge that sort of workplace environment. Thinking. The health and wellbeing benefits, I think it's probably one of the most visible parts of lockdown, has been the fact that people want to visit green space, and it's going to be really important that we continue that again through our planning processes to ensure development is well related and connected to green infrastructure, because there's going to be a real desire to want that, and I think the health and wellbeing agenda will be highly significant in terms of recovery. And then finally, the plan will need to develop thinking on opportunity for moving away from more traditional forms of infrastructure, but being more innovative, and again linked to clean growth and changing travel patterns is going to be really important. And again, Sedgemoor will be well placed given the ideas coming out of Gravity in terms of clean growth and the smart campus approach. So I think from that point of view, we are in a really good position to drive that forward in terms of innovative infrastructure. So to conclude then, hopefully that just gives a flavour of the thinking in terms of how we're going to support the recovery in terms of the economy and looking at infrastructure investment. It's probably a mix of short-term activity, but also some more ambitious longer-term thinking, which is really important that we move forward, and also building on those unique projects and strategies that we've got in place at Sedgemoor. That's it from me. I think it's over to Teresa now. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Leader and Executive. I'll start to go through my slides now, if I may, Andrew. What I've done is just try to give you a bit of a highlight of where we're going through with our recovery and the bits of work that we're mainly concentrating on at the moment. So I shall make my way through this. The first one is, I expect you'll have read a lot about this in the press and seen it on the television, but is one of the main things we had to do from COVID, high profile things, was to bring the rough sleepers into secure accommodation or permanent accommodation. And we had 25 rough sleepers that we brought in from that, 5 of which we've now got into a permanent home with some support around to try and keep that sustainable. We were already looking at that piece of work, and Sarah Stowell and her team were putting together a programme of which we'd been funded £240,000 from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. So we're now really getting on with that programme. We're about to recruit an outreach programme worker. We're working closely with the YMCA and ARC, the more adult homelessness group, Westfield Church, and this is also being picked up generally through the Vulnerable Persons Resilient Community Cell that Doug talked about earlier on in the process. So that's a really good piece of work that's going forward, and to be honest, it is being quite successful at the moment. So fingers crossed we can maintain that and prevent rough sleepers. And today you will have noticed the government have announced further £105 million, I think, to continue the rough sleepers programme. We think that's new money rather than the money we had already been funded for this current year, so that's good. Sarah's concerns around that are really about how we deal with the new to the street, so there's some concerns around that. One of the things that we think that is going to come out of COVID, we don't think, we know, is that we've got rising levels of antisocial behaviour across the HMOs, and Homes and Sedgemoor are experiencing that as well. So that's leading to evictions. We thought the evictions might start this month when the courts opened up, but they've delayed that again now. So that is good news, but it has given us a real impetus to up the work, and we've got a new tenancy support officer starting with us as well, which had been planned before, to work with landlords as well as the tenants to really sustain those tenancies, so that hopefully we won't need to get to supporting people as they're being evicted. So there's quite a lot of work that's going on across the services in our housing advice team, team that Chris Trevelyan heads up with the private rented sector. So together teams are really in there as well as working with the private landlords and the registered social providers. Duncan's team has been working really hard in the lockdown into actually re-energising the affordable housing supply, and we're bringing forward some more I guess creative projects, and there'll be a couple coming to members next at the Net Exec, where we're using our funding, either whether it's EDF, our enabling funding, our Section 106, and also working with developers to provide grants and things, loans and things. So we're bringing forward some really good projects and working to actually up the numbers there. Duncan's given me some stats. So we're still on target to deliver 150 affordable homes now, but during this lockdown period, they've really redoubled their efforts to work with the market developers to get some joint venture ideas together, which we hope will come through, so that we could add to that 150 another 70 plus additional affordable units. Hopefully you'll see that coming through as the year goes on. And we've also been in the position to offer up some shovel-ready projects through for the funding that we know that's going to come down from government, and the work that Doug has been putting together. So I think it's through the LEP, and again, that's Stuart's team and Duncan's team have been really working hard to bring some projects forward on that. So I think we're in a good position to really push that forward, because from everything we've just heard from Stuart, we're going to need to be able to do that. And listening to the other agenda item today about housing, it's really important that we are in a position to really support the growth of housing, so that we have homes for people that live in Sedgemoor to live in at an affordable level. Andrew, could you go on to the next slide, please? Again, we've heard it all in the news now that you can really see that the inequalities that have arisen, and actually the impact that has on the people that are living marginally, I suppose, or even in deprivation. And we can really see how those inequalities have played out across the piece nationally. Perhaps not so obviously in Sedgemoor, but they are there. So we've got to redouble our efforts on that. And Angela's working hard with us through that. So that's our main thing. We can see what's happening. Furthermore, Julie, right at the very beginning of this COVID, we tried to sort of establish a group to look at the impact of everything, the actual impact on the person, and how we're going to need to put support services in around that, or build up or change the way we're working to deal with the fallout of what we're predicting is going to fall out of the COVID stuff. So there's a lot of work going on there across all of us really, and wider into partnership, working with the CAB, DWP, Credit Union, and all those pieces. So we're again looking at what that impact is going to be as we see it. At the moment, there's a bit of a lag, but we know, we know there's a lot of people on furlough payments. Stuart mentioned the sort of redundancies that may come out of that, and so there will be a lot of people that have been just about managing for that time, and we're getting those calls through now as well that are worried about their mortgage payments. So we can see that the impact, we feel the impact on our housing advice team is going to increase, and to that end we've sort of moved a few of the resources around internally to deal with that. At the moment, it's a bit, we haven't felt it yet, but we really feel that it won't be long until we start doing that. So that, to me, that's a vital piece of work that we need to do, and it's built through the business intelligence work that Stuart mentioned right at the very beginning of his presentation, and all the detail and the data there, so that we can start building that evidence to know. So I have some concerns about how we're going to manage that and whether we've got the resources to do that in this immediate future, but no doubt I'll be coming back to you all with other reports on that. The other bits of stuff are the Together teams have been working really hard as well in dealing with the immediate response to COVID and getting the Together teams out. But one of the really good pieces of work that have come out there is the helpline and the triaging. So people have rung in when they've got issues. So almost we've now got a way of people self-referring into the Together teams. As you know, the Together teams are around preventing people needing services further up the line. And one of the really positive things that have come out of that is that we've had people self-referring in, and we can triage that and signpost them and help them where they can. So we can signpost them to other agencies or within other organisations, services within Sedgemoor. And that's been a really positive piece of work, and that's one of the main things in recovery. We want to see whether we can keep that going through the CAP programme and the way we're working. And because we've been working from home and not actually out and about, we've had the capacity to sort of deal with these calls, which can take 40 minutes, an hour, just to sit down and talk through everything with everybody to actually get to the crux of what they actually need. And on a similar vein, the actual Together team meetings have been going on anyway, but again remotely, and Rob's reporting to me that they are working really much better remotely because people can all attend, so you're getting a full attendance at those multi-agency meetings, and we're actually to pick up and make some strides forwards on that. So we're working really hard, and for me another positive out of this is the county-wide working and the collaboration that's going on through the Vulnerable Persons Recovery Cell, because homelessness, they're taking homelessness and gypsies and travellers into that to keep an overview. But what it's really done is actually made other agencies start to break. We're all breaking out of our silos and we're working efficiently together to actually plan services and see where we all fit together at a higher, more strategic level, and that's really working well. One of the best things that's come out of it, in my mind, in some way, is the Somerset Clinical Commissioning Group and the NHS are actually realising how important the community work is. So that's through the food distribution and the triaging, and that they're actually offering up a very small amount of money, but it's just start to actually put into some of that prevent work. So I think that's a really good stride forward, and I'd want to see that going, because I think it is valuable that we actually pool our resources and work collaboratively together. And clearly they'll be working on the other things that we're worrying about, which is the domestic abuse. You will have heard plenty of the news about that, and mental health services. So I think that's the end of my slides, isn't it, Andy? But I think I am worried about the impact of COVID on our just about managing, but and how we may have to restructure ourselves and resource ourselves to be able to deal with it. But I am very positive about the way we are working much better as a system rather than individual organisations. And I think that would be my one thing about this recovery, is to try and really build on that. And as part of it, and as we talked about, is actually getting to grips with really engaging with our communities to find out how they see their new norm in the future, and adapt our services to help support that going forward. So clearly there's loads in there, and I would say any members that want to talk to my individual team leaders to get a real feel of what we're doing, then that would please do. So they'll be pleased to talk through everything with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, it's Adrian Gardner speaking. I'll now run into my presentation. I'm conscious we've been going for some little while now, so I will try to rattle through my slides reasonably quickly. So there's a number of areas that my group are involved in and have been obviously heavily involved because of the nature of what we do in the both in the response and now moving into recovery. If I quickly just dwell on the sort of business advice and support firstly. So as you will probably realise, the environmental health team have a lot of responsibilities and linkages with businesses already in terms of managing things like food safety and health and safety at work in business premises. So we've been at the forefront of really helping businesses responding to their inquiries and giving advice on how to comply with the rule changes in this period and precautions around COVID in particular. So there have obviously been a number of versions of the rules as we've gone through this crisis, and we've been keeping on top of that, trying to sort of get information out to businesses and support them in trying to do the right things. Businesses have to comply with the guidance and general health and safety law, and so it's really positive that we're, I think, helping them through this process, and we've had lots of quite positive comments from especially the smaller businesses who perhaps haven't got the in-house corporate support that the bigger chains have. So there's a number of other things that we've been able to support on as well. So, for example, the CCTV team have traditionally run a radio link scheme connecting businesses, retail businesses and the nighttime economy to the CCTV control centre to deal with disorder and shoplifting, etc. We're launching this week a new version of that radio link scheme because the previous provider stopped providing the service, and so that's some good news that as the economy is opening, we're relaunching our radio link scheme at the same time. We also have some enforcement responsibilities, so we do have to, as well as providing advice and support, clearly we do get complaints occasionally, and we potentially have to use legal powers where a business were flagrantly not complying with the good practice to keep their workforce safe and to keep the public that are using that premises safe. So there's a lot of work going on there. Licensing colleagues as well, giving a lot of advice to licensed premises. If I could move on to slide 2, please. In the last sort of 2 to 3 weeks, there's been a lot of work ongoing with the reopening of what was called non-essential retail from the 15th of June, and we've been working with town councils, the town team, and various business groups to really focus on successfully opening up the town centres with a strong focus on protecting public health. That's the public health of the shop workers themselves, but also obviously the public visiting our town centres. Some of my colleagues have been working hard to procure and put up various signage, both around the town centres and other areas of Sedgemoor, and we've done a lot of floor stenciling and working with town councils on agreed locations for signage, for example. And one of the bigger, more controversial aspects working with the county council has been the highway restrictions that you will have seen in Burnham, in the High Street, being temporarily pedestrianised, but also in Bridgewater around Cornhill and High Street, where that has been temporarily pedestrianised, and some highway changes also through Eastover to restrict traffic and widen pavements. All that has been in conjunction with County Council and the town councils working closely to try and make the town centres more friendly to pedestrians, to give more space for social distancing, and reduce traffic levels in those areas. And so far, but it's not been universally popular, but so far there's been a lot of positive comments as well, and the detail of how it's working is being evolved day to day. So as well as that, we're obviously talking to businesses about how they manage their queues. My colleagues in Clean Surroundings have been doing a first-class job on arranging some power cleaning of the streets at this time, ready for the reopening. That's been ongoing over the last 2 weeks. Also weed spraying to try and keep those at bay, and reinstating some floral displays in the town centres as well, to just make them that bit more welcoming and attractive. One of the next challenges we will have with my licensing colleagues is the reopening of premises for eating, dining and drinking, and there's some work ongoing with that, with the latest announcements that taking effect in early July, and we're certainly considering all aspects, including greater use of pavement areas. The county council generally issue pavement licenses, but there is some talks with them about them passing that responsibility over to the district council, and we're just exploring that this week to see whether we can take that on and make sure that we can have a rapid response and turnaround to any such applications. If I could move on to the next slide, please. I'm not going to dwell long. Next slide I thought was track and trace. Have I missed a slide? No. So track and trace has moved by the looks of it. So there is an imaginary slide that I'm going to talk to, but just very quickly, we are working with Public Health at County Council and Public Health England to contribute to the track and trace system, which is obviously a national scheme but with some local delivery. And if you can imagine, as has been covered quite well in the press, although things are improving, there are likely to be local and sporadic outbreaks, and there have been quite high profile outbreaks in the country. There was Western General Hospital. There's a food plant in Anglesey that's been covered, for example, in the news. And so there will be local outbreaks and local investigations required to work out why that's happened and put controls in place. And that's where Public Health England utilise the local district council environmental health officers to support those investigations. And we are required with County Council Public Health to publish a new outbreak control plan by the end of June. That's underway with colleagues, and we'll lay out basically how local investigations will be handled and monitored. And we're also providing some staff resource to help the regional contact tracing service. So I'll move quickly on from that imaginary slide, and my last slide was beaches and clean surroundings, and just to say one of the sort of key areas we've been struggling with is the management of visitors. Obviously we are a big tourist destination area, particularly the coastal strip up from Burnham up to Breen and Barrow, and there's been a number of challenges over managing visitors. Our normal beach service was not stood up this year with the restrictions, but is now being introduced during June. We have supervision on the jetty at Burnham, and our general beach service is opening up at Barrow this very week. So we're obviously having to revise how we work, revise our operations. We're looking at having a cash-free service there for access to the beach parking. We're having to manage our parks carefully. We've got a lot of signage up, and obviously, as we said earlier in the presentation, there's a lot of extra people visiting beaches and parks, so those services are under strain. There's extra litter and debris being left by people, so there's a whole set of challenges to try and keep these areas looking clean and tidy, and I think from the start of July, from the announcements this week, we have to reopen play areas, and they are now very overgrown as they've not been managed or cut in the last 2 to 3 months. So there'll be a big task there to get play areas up to standard and back ready for usage. As a final point, I think waste services have been really under pressure during this period, and if you can imagine the impact of everybody being at home more, working from home, etc., not being able to go out to restaurants, etc. There's been a lot more waste being created and a lot more recycling being created, a lot more tins of lager being drunk at home, and lots of bottles and cans, and so the recycling service is seeing astronomical usage, and for example the free containers, boxes, recycling boxes and food containers, etc., that we provide free of charge, there is about a 70% increase in requests for containers as people are generating much more waste at home, and therefore the contractors are really struggling to cope with demand. So that all needs to be stabilised and settled down, because that trend may continue for some time and has a real impact on resources. So again, we are working with SWP to analyse and work out how we manage this in the next few months. Hopefully that gives you a quick run through of some of the challenges that we have been facing over this period. It has been an exceptionally difficult period for a number of services. I think we've done really well to cope with it, I have to say. But now obviously we need to plan ahead for the next period, and the challenges that are evolving over week to week over the next 6 months. I hope that gives you a good enough summary, and I'll hand back to Doug or Andrew at that point. Thank you.
Are we going to hear from Bob?
Indeed, thank you very much. I'll keep this very brief, just to focus on the internal recovery group. I've now sent through the terms of reference and our action plan on the internal recovery group, and it's just to say that it is very much focused on the workforce, the workspace, and supporting members with IT and other structures. Obviously, there's been some issues about health and wellbeing and making sure staff who are working from home are supported properly with IT equipment, and also with support from HR and others, because this can be a difficult time to work from home and look after children. So the focus has been on really opening up the building. How do we do that safely, following government guidance? And we've conducted a number of staff surveys in order to achieve that. And we've worked with our partners, particularly around how we open up the customer contact points without opening up reception and putting other people at risk. But we are now looking to be able to open up the reception in a proper way, so that people can come into the building and make inquiries if they want to, but actually direct face-to-face meetings or engagement with our customers is taking place, and alternative arrangements have been made, which has been part of the role of the internal recovery group. With that has come some other work that we need to do in order to support staff more generally in being able to facilitate the long-term working from home, because I think this isn't going to go away, and the government made it clear last night that if you can work from home principle will still be there, so providing that support is important, and investing in our IT is going to be important. So as you can see, we're looking to commit to introduce Office 365, which will move us on to Teams rather than Skype, a SharePoint and other enterprise-wide facilities that will make working both for members and officers easier, and allow us to work with our partners, many of whom have already moved on to Teams in one way or another. So that'll supplement that. We've got some significant work to do on the workspace itself, and we've been working with health and safety colleagues to make sure that both Bridgewater House and Collie Lane are open up safely, and working with our partners, obviously Homes in Sedgemoor, the police and the County Council, and further work will be undertaken when the new guidance about the change distancing rules come in, and the group will be looking at that. But in essence, we're building that around the 4 R's, which you will see if you read the internal recovery action plan, which is about how we return people to the office, how we retain the good practices that actually this has forced us into, some of the working from home, how we resist going back to some perhaps not so good old practices, and what is it that we can do new to build upon perhaps some of the lessons learned from this COVID activity and the alternative digital solutions that we've been working on to make sure that we drive the organisation forward. So that's going to be our focus for recovery, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Members can hide the slide presentation now, and we're back in session. I've got to say, I hope members have found that really useful. I certainly, I think it's the first time I've had everything come together in one presentation, one slide presentation, both the activity that has taken place up until now and the proposed activity in the future. Teresa Harvey said something that I thought was particularly poignant as she was presenting, was reshaping of the council in order to meet future needs. And I think that's a key fact to me, that you know, what we have been providing in the way in which we've been providing in the past may not be fit for purpose for the future, and that thinking work now is a positive and will certainly help us in the future. I was also impressed, I must say, by the collaborative and coordinated way in which the work has been carried out throughout the organisation and our partners. And I certainly, the whole thing came across to me as a particularly professional approach, and I certainly feel that significant work's gone into the terms of reference for the recovery work, and the actual work is actually taking place at the moment. And I've got to say, I was certainly impressed by the presentation, be it slightly longer than I had anticipated. I think it was, in fact, worth it. I'll go to the Chief Executive now, just in case there's any comments that she'd like to make at this point. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Leader. I mean, I think I would just echo some of the sentiments that you've just said. I mean, it's an extremely busy time. There are things changing, as we all know, certainly weekly, if not daily. And I think the presentation demonstrates just how wide the workload is. And I think it's also a huge opportunity. We've talked about this in the past. You know, this has been an awful experience, but it's also given us an opportunity to look at how we operate, not just internally as an organisation, but how we work with our partners. And as you referenced, you know, Teresa's comments and others, how we work with our communities and what their needs and wants will be in the future. So, yeah, I mean, I'm really pleased with the work that's ongoing. And I hope, you know, members won't underestimate that, because it is a huge challenge at this time. And everybody's stepping up to the plate really well. So I'll just publicly say a huge thank you to staff for that and the support members are giving. But yeah, that's really it from me. Thank you. Any questions I can answer, if there are any, then I'm happy to do so.
Right, I'll go to members of council in a moment. My understanding of, we had a presentation from Sarah Stillwell at the members drop-in session last week, and that was an impressive amount of work that was being undertaken there in very difficult circumstances. And it is pleasing that we've now been given, or the government has decided to recognise this with additional funding for homelessness and rough sleepers. My only worry is that they've only announced 1 year funding at the moment. To be honest, I believe that homelessness is something that isn't 1 year and then gone. It's something that we will need to plan for as part of the recovery phase for the future. Councillor Smedley. Any other members of council then, while we wait for Councillor Smedley? No, then I go to Councillor Slocum. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. You kind of sort of pinched a lot of my words, really, as you always do. although you say them a lot better than me, I would like to say that I think this presentation today has given us an immense amount of confidence. I think the business support, building networks, making sure that it's vitally important. Sedgemoor, we're back to business. Local support supply chains, becoming pioneers, infrastructure. All of that is really good, and thinking about the health and well-being benefits as well. I was immensely impressed, housing advice team, to know what's being done, and like you said, Sarah Stillwell last week is incredible, but the county-wide collaboration on that, I think, is absolutely amazing. That this is still, and we have learnt a lot. On the environment team, I have to say the Clean Surrounds have been incredible, and I would personally like to thank them. I think the CCTV with the shoplifting and other various problems, I think that's been difficult, and I wish you all the best with that one. On the internal recovery, I have to say I can't wait to get us on 365 and get us Teams, because I think that will make our work in practices even better if it could be. But I would like to thank each and every one. I hope I haven't missed anyone, because I just think this shows an immense amount of confidence in Sedgemoor. We haven't lost any amount of momentum. We're still there, and we're still moving forward and learning and being able to capture all the things that we've learnt in this difficult time. I think that is absolutely incredible, and I'm pretty proud to be part of the Sedgemoor team. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're quite right. Learning is a key feature on this, and we will continue to learn way into the future, I'm sure, and that's good. Councillor Healy.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. To reiterate what you and the Deputy Leader said, actually, I've been very impressed, and I think you're right about the quality of the slides, the presenter, in depth of where Sedgemoor's coming, and other councils, of course. But I was really struck with Stuart Hewlett's slideshow as well, from a commercial point of view, obviously, in the fact that even though we've come through, and I hope you'll all agree, the most difficult of times, looking at Stuart Hewlett's words and his colleagues that's put this together and all the other presentations, amazingly enough, we could get opportunities as well for the future, because it's opened everybody's minds up to the way we do, commercial work. We're looking at the retail part of it, and I think working closely with the retailers, manufacturers, etc. in the area is a way forward. And I think that cohesion is going to help totally by bouncing off each other. But I was really pleased to see also, and I know other colleagues will be, the importance of Hinkley Point, the importance of Northgate coming on, the importance of gravity, all going to give us benefits for the future. And that's hopefully the more and I'll use Stuart Hewlett's words if I may, by working in close proximity with industries like this, actually the quicker we do it, the more we're going to be able to offer people jobs and hope for the future. So all I can say is well done, been very impressed. You're very much right, Leader. It was an excellent presentation.
Thank you. I mean, it's a really fast-moving scene that is quite difficult to keep up, particularly with comments and new proposals coming through from government. I must admit, I have a slight feeling of caution over the relaxing of perhaps social distancing rules from 2 meters to 1, not least because of the safety aspect, but also, we've just sent our Clean Surroundings teams out over the last 2 weeks, putting down 2 meter warnings and ordering 2 meter signs and various other things, and now we have to prepare for potential 1 meter rulings. I'm not there to question the government's thought process on this, but it puts more burden on the local authorities, and I hope they recognise the work that local authorities have risen to over the last few months. Councillor Smedley, are you there?
May I come in as well, please?
Yep. Okay.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me vocally, maybe?
Yep, we can hear you, Brian. Yeah,
right,
you go ahead.
Can't seem to start the video for some reason. I just really wanted to say that we welcome the report and obviously support the work of the officers that they've done in this. Particularly the way of thinking about recovery is very crucial. We particularly like Stuart Hewlett's clean green growth phrase, and Doug Bamsey's including the delivery on the climate emergency during it. Also, congratulations about the Rough Sleeper initiative. I think it shows that could have been done some time ago, but maybe it took an emergency like this to get it actually done and provide resources for the future. What I particularly wanted to ask about was Adrian Gardner's points about compliance and enforcement. As you said, you've just spent a bit of money and time putting down 2-metre markings everywhere, and now that's changed to 1, and Mr. Gardner said they'd be involved in legal advice, licensing advice, but is there scope for direct intervention from Sedgemoor officers in reassuring people when there are breaches of any of the issues relating to social distancing and the new throngs of people that will be going to these, enthusiastically going to these premises? Could I ask about that, please?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I think we will have a role in both licensing and environmental health in dealing with complaints. We've had complaints about various aspects of this throughout the period, so we will expect more as the lockdown is substantially lifted and there are more activities going ahead, and we will be working with licensed premises, etc. I think, obviously it is a really difficult area, and we will have to give balanced, sensible advice to try and make this workable. And I think it remains to be seen how easy that will be. But we will both be trying to support the businesses on the one hand, but also trying to make sure that the sound public health guidance is being followed. I think there will be all sorts of issues from this, because if there's more outdoor dining and drinking, there'll be more noise, there'll be more knock-on challenges for neighbours and things like that. So the whole issue is live, and we have to react and try and manage it for everybody.
Right, thank you. And I think Doug wants to come in, and then I've got Janet Keane who wants to speak.
Thank you very much, Leader. I think one of the really important things that I'm very pleased that members found the presentation useful, because we're trying to get across here that it's a multi-function here right across the council delivering on recovery, and that's why we've got assistant directors, and indeed Mel and Alison are also involved. But we're trying to give you a snapshot here today, and the next wave of easing a lockdown epitomises the challenges and opportunities. I've been enjoying a week's leave, as you know, and I've been in Barrow and Breen on Monday, and that's a very strange place insofar as how quiet that is. It isn't going to remain quiet for much longer, and therefore the hospitality and leisure side of our economy, of course, is so important. So too is the protection of the health of our community and visitors community, and therefore that is like an ongoing process here. So it really demonstrates that type of next stage of the multifaceted part of recovery here, of linking economy, environment, and indeed people's welfare. So it's a very much important, a lot of stages going through here. And in all of this, and that's what the terms reference indicates, for key decisions, clearly we'll be going through the programme board, but also coming to the executive as we need to. Today was very much trying to give you an overall sense of the amount of work that's being done, and the amount of work that's going to be done, and the action plan which you've had appended gives you a fuller picture of that. But as a number of officers said, always very happy to answer any questions that members may have as we go through this process. Thank you.
Yes, and I think we've certainly got a sense of everything that's going on and will be going on in the future. Now, I will just make reference. It's just slightly unfortunate that we've had a number of complaints about the temporary pedestrianisation of the town centres and areas. And I do keep stressing to people that, it's there for safety reasons. We're not doing it because we think it's going to upset people. There's a real need for people to keep social distancing at the moment because, as many people have said, there is still no cure to this at the moment. And I would prefer us not to become one of the hot spots that we have to lock down again. So, this is preventative work that we're doing in order to try and keep people as safe as possible in the environments that we have within Sedgemoor. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Leader. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Everything in this recovery program, it is all good news. And is there any, first point, is there any way that we can get this more widely known to combat the doom and gloom that the national press and TV journalists seem to find that they're obsessing about? Their news is not providing a good atmosphere for the younger people. But my main other point is, within the skills part of the program, and this, both I think with Teresa and with Stuart Howlett, are we liaising with the county on education because of the getting to the young people before they leave school to promote the opportunities for vocational training and the help that may be offered to people who've been made redundant and would need to entirely rethink their lives, reskill, and under normal circumstances before all this pandemic happened, that part of training was eye-wateringly expensive. And I think this is all part of our recovery, to give people personal hope, to know that there is a good future out there. It may be different to the past, but it's a good future. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I'm sure we will be putting out information on the activities that we have been doing and plan to do, as we have been doing. I don't know whether Doug could pick up the vocational training or the education side of things.
Yeah, well, I can do it. Absolutely, there's a lot of coordination on that, and if you look into the detail of the action plan, you'll see there's a great deal of work on training and skills. And one of the things, for example, Hinkley Point has, as you know, continued throughout the process of lockdown and is very much now gearing up. There's an example of a real driver on training and skills, and as just to reflect on something that's changed fundamentally in the days that we can just about remember, where we were heading out of 2019, we were in very much a full employment situation. And Hinkley Point was working on that basis. Now, with a greater level of unemployment, it changes the emphasis potentially, because now we can see Hinkley as an example, as an opportunity to those who have lost their jobs. And there's a real emphasis there of actually, if you like, re-emphasising and using it as a drive for recovery. But absolutely, Councillor Keane, all that she says, absolutely, we're doing that. But we're more than happy to talk through the detail at another time about how we're doing that. But training and skills and giving hope is very, very important, because in that very significant way we've always said as a council, the economy is at the heart of what we do, but the reason why it's there is the economy needs to deliver for local people, and training and skills is central to that, clearly.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the college will play an important part on that. It's gratifying to know that we will, as an organisation, be meeting with them fairly soon, and they are a key partner in delivery of some of the training to give people a future. It was interesting on the radio, I think it was this morning, when somebody was saying that in times of unemployment in the past, when people are being made redundant, one of the stopgap jobs that people had was working in pubs, restaurants, and that kind of industry. The hospitality industry, until such time as they secured another job. That option is not there at the moment, and that's something that brought it home to me, how serious this could become. Members, are there any other comments or questions that you would like to make? No, in that case then, and any of the officers who presented any of the reports would like to come back on anything that was said at all? No. Okay then, it's beholden upon me then to put the recommendations to you, which I am happy to do so. They're to approve the creation of the Recovery Programme Board, and where's my screen gone? Come back screen. Proposed terms of reference, endorse the terms of reference, and to endorse the draft recovery plan. That's been moved. I think Councillor Slocum is seconding, and I'll now go through each of you, and if you could signal that you've heard and listened to the debate and whether you're in favour or against the recommendation. And I will start with Councillor Slocum.
Thank you, Leader. I have been here and listened to all the debate, which has been extremely interesting, and I am totally in favour. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Caswell. Councillor Doddridge.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I've followed the debate and very happy to support the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Gilling.
Yes, Leader, perfectly happy to support the proposals and congratulate the team that have produced this report.
Thank you. Councillor Healy.
Heard, listened to the very interesting debate and totally for it. Thank you. Supportive.
Thank you. Councillor Keane.
Thank you. Yes, I've heard all the speakers and followed the slides, and I agree on the recommendation.
Thank you. And I'll just pop back to Councillor Caswell. Are you there? No. Okay, then I'm happy to vote in favour. Also, Mr. Mel Hewish.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Caswell appears to have just recently left the call. The vote as it stands is all members who have voted, that's 6 members, are all in favour, so it is unanimous. So you are quorate, the decision is a valid decision, so I mean it's up to you if you wanted to pause the meeting to get him back in, but in the circumstances you are in a position where you can proceed with the decision.
I'm comfortable that we proceed with the decision. I know Councillor Caswell has had a number of IT problems, and I wouldn't wish to prolong his agony over this. Members then voted in favour. That is therefore carried. There are no other items of business on the agenda for today. I'd just like to thank you all for your attendance to the first meeting, and thank you for your input, all members and officers. Thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you again at the next executive meeting. I would just, however, say for other group leaders, I think under the circumstances, I will propose to postpone the Leaders Liaison group that would have taken place some 25 minutes ago, and we'll pick up any issues that you have outside of that, and look forward to seeing you again next week. There being no further business, I'd like to declare the meeting closed.